I wanted to talk today about bad writing advice and bad writing, because I often hear about bad writing, and students and writers I know talk about their own writing, and they say they're doing bad writing. And I'm very uncomfortable with that, and people who know me know that I'm not a Pollyanna about talking about issues in writing, problems in writing, but I really regret when people talk about their own writing as bad writing. And there's a trope in writing circles, the shitty first draft. And it's as if there's some kind of pride in that, but it's not really pride, it's shame. And you don't have to talk about your writing that way. And what I want to say about that, when people say it's bad, I know it's bad, it's a draft, it's bad, it's terrible, here's what I want to say about that. If you were pregnant with a baby, and men and women can hear this equally, if you were carrying a baby, and you were, say, 6 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant, and I were to say to you, how's it going? How's the baby? Do you think about the baby? What's going on? If your answer was, it's bad, it's a bad baby, it's a shitty baby, well, that's absurd. No one would say that. You just wouldn't say that. Because the truth is, it's not finished. It's not done. It's a work in progress. And I really would encourage you to have a little more faith in your work and not to trash it, and not to trash talk yourself about your bad writing. And give yourself a way of thinking about it as incomplete writing, unfinished writing. Samuel Beckett, fail more, fail better. But there's no advantage that I can think of to putting yourself down. You can be kinder to yourself, and if you are willing to love the work that is imperfect and still in progress, and have some respect for it, it's going to be better work, and you're going to have a better relationship to it. So this brings me to the other side of bad writing, which is bad writing advice. And there's a lot of it out there, and students come into my classes having been given a lot of bad writing advice. I think everybody gets a lot of terrible writing advice in high school, and probably the number one artifact of the bad writing advice that I hear about, and we all have been told it, is write what you know. How many times have you been told, write what you know? And what I want to say about that is, what do you know? What do you know? Maybe it's boring, maybe it's limited. A story about a person with a feeling, a story about a guy who realized something. There's not much movement in that. There's nowhere to go, really, with something like that. Rather than thinking about it as write what you know, here are two better ways to think about it. Here's some good advice to counter that bad advice that I'd like you to set aside. Write what you want to know. One of the great joys of being a fiction writer, particularly, but this applies to poetry, it applies to nonfiction, is finding out about stuff that you want to write about, that you're curious about, that you're interested in about, that would seem to make a good story, good territory for your writing. So write what you want to know. And then, when you're writing, not write what you know what you write. Get your details right. Do just enough research so that what you're writing has the ring of authenticity, and whatever world you're building hangs together and makes sense for itself. Know your territory enough. Now, don't over-research. You don't want to do so much research that when someone reads your story or reads your novel, they're going to come away thinking, wow, she must have done a lot of research. Because that, to me, is not a total success. That, to me, feels like someone who did so much research, they then had to make sure it was all there on the page. And probably, if people are left after your story thinking about all your fantastic research, it wasn't really metabolized. It wasn't really transmuted into fiction. So do just enough research to make it work. Don't over-research it. But know what you write. One more piece of advice that I think is an essential piece of advice for writing, and probably lots of other things too. Trust your own strangeness. It's yours.